streaming is on. Okay, so welcome to my open mic session. Today I will be telling you something about EU controlled vocabularies. This is more like a research talk because I was just looking into the European sites. How are they handling ontologies? If they do have some top-level ontologies, if they use them, possibly how, and also what are the possibilities to connect some of the stuff we are doing mostly in with the semantic government vocabulary as Gov, because this is by the topic the closest thing to the European legislation we have. So in the first two slides, this is just for the record that we have some semantic government vocabulary in the Czech Republic, and the basis behind it is that everything the administrative bodies do is based on the legislation acts. And in those legislation acts, we are using or reusing some of the terms, and those terms therefore need to be defined unambiguously, which is thing that is not always true. And all those stuff is important because of the administrative bodies based on what I said before, are acquiring, analyzing, processing, and describing data among a lot of other stuff. So for this, it is really important for us to have everything ambiguously defined, mainly in the legislation. And the problem we have here basically is that the terms are defined in various contexts, but this is basically the reason why we are using controlled vocabularies or ontologies. So the semantic government vocabulary should solve this problem by creating a knowledge graph for public administration. This is something which is already in use. This was created during some projects at the Ministry of Interior, and I just believe that it will grow bigger in the future, in the next years probably. There is some web application that serves for looking or browsing the vocabularies and the terms in an ambiguous way, which is also nice. And there is also some application assembly line which was created by people from the CTU, by us, basically. And this serves for the creation of controlled vocabularies or the data based on those vocabularies. So basically, we are able to combine terms from various vocabularies, and it is possible to interconnect them and also connect them to some top upper level vocabularies. We have some top level vocabularies which are using. Basically, the thing is that the European Commission also have some regulations. The basic legislation process in the European Union or European Commission is that the Commission and Parliament, they create some regulation, and after the Parliament approves it, then there is some time for member countries to transpose those regulations into the national legislation. This is something which is written on the website. This is something that happens. This is the legislation process. And in the end, the regulations also uses some vocabularies to describe the legislation itself, the processes, the governmental bodies, or the administrative bodies of the European Union, European Commission. And for all of that, they are using some kind of vocabularies. So the thing is that if we want to get from the national level to the international level with our semantic governmental vocabulary, we need to somehow connect it to the European vocabularies. Basically, connect it to the higher level than is some national level. This shouldn't be so difficult because most of that stuff, those regulations are somehow transposed into national legislation. That means that if we are modeling national legislation, uh, we are somehow modeling those regulations. But the regulation itself, it's a document. This document is in some register, and the document is also somehow described. So what I was looking at was how is it described, what kind of vocabularies or ontologies or taxonomies or stuff is it using, and how is it browsable, accessible, described, etc. So the first thing I found is the publications office of the European Union. This is quite interesting thing. They have access to the European law, the European data. It is also possible through the publication office to look into some tenders which are going on and some research results of Joint Research Center and other European scientific authorities. Also, there is the publications, and in the lower left corner of this page, you can see the EU vocabularies, which refers to the reference data and resources for the knowledge management. This is basically what are we interested in. But briefly, I will just show you what are the other stuff that publication office publishes. So basically, it's European law. For the European law, there is something called Outlikes, which is basically the web page summarizing all of the terms or lexical terms according to the law, the European law, basically. And it is in some basically it's in some RDF form, which is also quite nice. It's quite ahead of most of the member countries. I will come back to this topic later. Then we have European data, and this is basically something like the data catalog for the European Union. The thing is that not all of the data sets that are provided on the national level are migrated to this data portal. So basically, most of those data sets are something for the need of the European governmental bodies. And among the data sets are also all of the vocabularies and ontologies and models and so on. So we will get to this later too. Some of the countries are providing some data here, but basically most of the local data sets are not here. And then we have some publications. In the publications, this is quite interesting stuff because a lot of people when they are going through the media, they just see some of the buzzwords. Most of those buzzwords are somehow explained here in the publications. It's about how the European Union works, what's the Green Deal and the energy. Basically, all these publications are in some HTML or PDF format, and this is something which describes how the European Union works. But it's also quite interesting to go through that for some users. So let's go back to the vocabularies. The publication office, they publish the vocabularies among others. They are counting with vocabularies as datasets, not some kind of specialization of the dataset. So basically, the first thing we can do in the vocabulary, we can just search in all of the vocabularies if we are looking for some specific term. I don't really think that this is a good idea to start with this because the meaning and the purpose of the vocabularies is really wide, and therefore you probably won't be able to find the result you look for using this search bar. So we look into the control vocabularies and models. How is it done? So basically, most of the vocabularies are divided into two categories. The first is control vocabularies. The second is the models. Control vocabularies, according to the EU Publication Office, this is a set of consistent, it's a consistent way to describe the data, and basically it's just a set of the words or phrases which is somehow organized. Mostly it's in an alphabetical order, but I don't think this is something which is important because if you work with the data, you can basically sort it as you like. So the alphabetic order is not so important. The important thing mostly is that it provides translations of these top level terms into the national languages. European Union has, I think, 24 languages which are used at the official level, and the legislation terms are translated into all of those languages, and the controlled vocabularies is the official way of the translations. There is also a funny thing that it's always more complicated than it looks like because we have some official translations in the EU vocabularies, but that does not mean that those translations are necessarily used in the legislation documents itself, in their translations, which is fun. And for the models, this is some primal conceptualization or creation of control vocabularies. Basically, those models are reusing somehow the terms which are defined in the control vocabularies, and it serves for the validation, and it does not necessarily define the usefulness of the vocabularies itself, which is also quite funny. There are some publication guidelines on how to provide the vocabularies or models. Basically, there are some rules that almost anyone who wants to add some vocabulary can do so. And the rules are following. The dataset file, it must be in one of the following formats. So it's semantic, generic models or alignments. Basically, most of the stuff is some RDF or XML files. It's possible to upload SVGs or CSVs, which are not either from the aforementioned formats, but however. And there are two rules. It has to have a documentation and a release note. Documentation and the release note should be in HTML or PDF, and it has to contain at least the title of the dataset, title of the documentation, scope of the dataset, and its description. And then there are also some conventions for file naming the files which you upload, and it's basically the dataset name, the content of the file, and optionally you can use the version of the file or the date when it is published or to which date it is valid, basically. And all of those data which are uploaded into the EU vocabularies can be downloaded in this way. I will show this later, but this basically works. Funny thing is that although it's important and it's also mandatory to have the documentation and release file, not all of the vocabularies, even uploaded by the publication office, have. So some of the data sets don't have documentation or release note. As I aforementioned, we have two groups of vocabularies. First is control vocabularies, which is divided into 5 groups. And for us, the important two are thesauri and taxonomies. So the authority tables are meant for interconnecting some institutional lexicons at the European level. The ATTO tables, basically, there is a lot of ATTO tables which are basically files for internal application at the publication office, and only some small part of it is published this way. But it's not something that would make sense for someone who doesn't really know what do they describe. And the alignments, this is something for the database interoperability. This is basically the set of interconnection between relation database tables, which are used at the European level. So some of those stuff doesn't really make sense for me to have it published like this together with thesaurary taxonomies. So thesaurary taxonomies, this is something which is important for us. I will just show you briefly how is it published, how does it look like, what the user who enters the pages can get. So as you can see, the control vocabulary has some details. This is the thesaurary of Digital Europa, so it has some basic metadata, including version. The thing is that all of the assets published here has its unique identifier in the form of URI, which is nice, at least. And it has the list of version and the date of publication and the author, this kind of stuff. So this is basically graph somehow visualized. What can we see in the content, basically? This is, I think, yeah, this is thesaurary. So for the thesaurary, we can see the concept, and the concept is basically the broader terms, narrower terms, and related terms, which is here the BT1 budget policy and T1 multi-annual financial framework. This is the basic visualization of the thesaurary, which is not, I think, really user friendly. Moreover, you can see on the right side the translations into all the European languages. So in Czech it's rozpočet EU. Fine. Then we have some accessibility. We can see that those terms may be used in more trees, and in every tree you can see those narrow terms, broader terms, related terms. So, for example, this is thesaurary for education and communication. And in the downloads page, you can download it basically in the zip, which contains everything in one file. And then you have some RDF files, mostly. In the advanced view tab, you can browse the data based on the concepts, collections, schemes, properties, which is more like it. The good thing that if you click at that, it's not here shown, but I think I will show you that later. You have it in some languages. I was not able to filter only one language in this window, which is really weird because this basically requires everyone to speak fluently German, because otherwise you are not able to sort it anyhow. The metadata, it shows what is the title, what is the model which is used for the description, and also the spark point. And this is the important thing. If it starts to be interesting here, you can also access the spark endpoint directly. So you can get the data from the spark endpoint. It requires the knowledge of the data structure, of course. And data structure, it's not really something that is easy to find here, but it's also possible. I just ran basic Spark query to show you that there really is some graph from which all other information are built here. So let's get to the thesaurary. There are basically three thesaurary provided by the publication office. And I think the only important one is for us is the Eurovoc. The other two, Digital Europa thesaurus, is thesaurus covering the subjects of European public communication. So it describes how the European Commission communicates to the public and describes that way how it does, which is important stuff. But I don't really think that it's something we would reuse. And a class, it's thesaurary of European Commission library. So basically, it's some ontology that ontology is not an ontology; it's a thesaurary that describes the terms for the library and its contents. And Eurovoc is multilingual notice covering activities of the European Union. So basically, it contains most of the terms which are used in the legislative frame of the European Union. I set the language at the page to Czech, so if there were some Czech equivalents, it showed me that in Czech. If they were not, it was in English. So it's some mashup. I can see that I have informace, but I have downloads. I have documentace, but I have alignments. Also, I see that here is something like nejnovější, which is not Czech. So this is so. This is funny. As author and publisher, I see everything in Czech, but if you look at those buttons on the right side, it's also in English. So it's some Babylon stuff. If we go further, we can browse through the concepts, and here you can filter the language in which you are interested in. There are not only the European language, but mostly the languages from the ISO. Not all of them are supported, but basically this stuff works. So if I select Czech, I can see that in Czech and so on. And then I go through the resources in some basic graph view. But it's really simple. If we would use ontography for this, it would be much more user friendly. So that was something about the Eurovoc. It has a lot of concepts. It's widely used, and you can also look at the Eurolikes site. I will go through some of the examples later, but we can now go for the taxonomies. There's quite a lot of taxonomies. Difference between Thesauri and the taxonomy is that the taxonomy is basically just a tree. It's not possible to add some non-preferred terms or some synonyms. So basically, this is really just a tree. We can't use this cost-related term. And basically, the taxonomy is just the tree of terms with some translations to other languages. Most of the taxonomies which are uploaded in the European vocabulary site are uploaded from Eurostat, and most of those taxonomies are updated every year with the new version. So we have some combined nomenclature, we have some location nomenclature. So most of the nomenclatures which are used for the yearly statistics provided by Eurostat are listed here in the taxonomies. And I can go through the models, and in the models part of the European vocabularies, we can see 4 subgroups. Basically, it's schemas, which are XML schemas, it says these. XML schema definition files that are used for basically validation of the XML files, and it shows the structure which is wanted. So basically, this is not something connected to ontology or RDF or semantic web, something like that. Then there are application profiles. Application profiles usually describes how to apply standards into practice. For example, we can see there something like DCAT AP application profiles for the DCAT, which is used for metadata catalogs and this kind of stuff. And then we can see the presentation style sheets. Presentation style sheets, it's nothing else than CSS files that are used for the visualization of the data as the PDF or HTML files. Nothing else. It's also here in the models. So the only thing that that interests us here are the ontologies. So there is 8 ontologies published, and I'm not going through all the stuff we can see here. I just show, I think, 2 of them, which are important. But the thing is that this is ontology as we know it. This is something using usually OWL and RDFS for the description of the topic. So the first one I show you is the common data model. This is something publication office uses for description of all other resources that are published by the publication office. So this is basically the basic model which is used at the whole pages for all other public stuff. It's based on the FRBR model. I will show you on the next slide what does it mean because I don't remember that exactly. But this is some ontology also using scores, RDFS and all. And it mostly represents the relationships between the resource types. We can see some agents, expressions, items, works. Basically, it comes out from RDFS and a lot. So it's functional requirements for bibliographic records. Yeah, so we can see that most of the stuff is bibliography here. This is the DC terms metadata. So some purpose, some date it was created, date from the last publication. So basically, it comes from the 2009. The last version is from 2021. It's provided by IFLA, which is some association working with the bibliography, International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions. And basically, it looks the basic models are here. The documentation is at this link you can access, and it's creating some realizations between works, expressions, manifestations, persons, corporate bodies, concept objects, etc. And the other ontology I want to talk about a little is the ELI, European Legislation Identifier. This is the thing, this is quite important for the legislation of the European Union because it describes how the European legislation is described. Yes, so it sets up the frame for metadata for the European legislation. It has actually three pillars, which are listed here in the on the top of the page. So the identification of the legislation, what is the legislation, what does it describes, how is it identified, who is the author, what's the date, is it in force or not, etc. Second pillar is about properties, which describes those acts, and the third is the serialization of metadata elements using RDFA. I will show you in the end of the presentation where is it actually used, but the ontology itself is not really it's not really something huge or difficult to understand, but it's now nicely described. So we have some administrative areas, some formats in which the legislation is published, languages, legal value if it's enforced, not enforced, and it's possible to download the old file. The old file has everything quite nice. I opened it in Protege really easily. For example, the legal value is authoritative, definitive, official, unofficial. And those instances are also well described what does they actually mean. So for the European legislation, this is really good. There is a lot of object properties that describes relationships in the legislation documents. So, and it is really used in the EURLEX. If you look into the EURLEX Europe by EU, you have a set of all European legislation which is published, and all of that legislation is described using the European legislation identifier ontology. You can also see here is the identifier standardized by the European by the LE. So you can go through that. You can see the metadata, which are also provided using this ontology. So this is something which is fun. Last vocabulary I will be talking about. It's not provided in the EU vocabularies, which is something I was really confused about because when I started this topic, I was thinking most at the ISA 2 core vocabularies because this is something we have already used or we were a little bit trying to use in the semantic governmental vocabulary. And the essential vocabularies you can access it from this link, and all it contains 5 vocabularies, and those vocabularies are fully available at the GitHub. So you can look at the GitHub. You have links here, and those 5 vocabularies they focus on persons, which is basically the living persons, people. Then we have businesses and public organizations, which are the not the real people, but not the physical people, but the people defined by the law. And then we have some locations and criterions and core evidences. I was using locations in description of location in the SGOV. So there were some interconnections to this vocabulary. I'm not really sure if it's in the version that was actually published, but it was at least designed in this way. And if we look at it, we can see basically that, or is it somewhere later? No, it's not so. If you look at the topics, we can see that this is usually something really similar to what is described by the Czech national basic registries. We have some register of persons, register of businesses, register of rights and duties. So this is something very similar, but this is only the ontology, or the descriptive model. If you look at those GitHub repositories, we can see that inside we just find one TTL file that describes the whole vocabulary. This is the location, so we can see it uses RDF, RDFS, SCOS, XSD, DC, all, so everything we use and know, and it's described quite easily. It's understandable. It's fine. There also have some PDF documentation of all vocabulary, and they also have the UML model. So in this UML model for the core location, we can see we have some location with identifier and name. It has some geometry. It can be interconnected to some address, which belongs to some administrative unit. So this is some basic model which is valid, I dare to say, for the whole European Union. So it's possible to use it. The funny thing is that it's not so widely used. I'm not really sure why. So to the conclusions, European Publication Office have a set of control vocabularies and models. Basically, in the RDF, we can see some taxonomies. There's already ontologies. Most of the ontologies are top level for annotation, using for other data sets which are published by the Publication Office of the European Union or to describe the European legislation. For these use cases, it is used quite well. It's used overall, but this has no real impact on the publication on the national level, which is, I think that it's a great opportunity which is not really used right now. And then we have those isotope vocabularies, which is in RDF. I think that most of the Czech base registries could be interlinked to those models, but this would be maybe some task for the digitalization agency. I'm not really sure. So it's overall it's a good basis for the RDF data. A lot of resources published is just for the internal use of the Publication Office or European Commission. So at least it is transparent, but it's not really useful to some use of this stuff. And this is from me everything. I know this was more like a research talk, but I think that it may be interesting. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad for it. That's all it was.
Okay, thanks, Michal. It was interesting. I would like to know, I'm not sure if you know, but do you know the tool that they use for visualization of the taxonomies, and there was this graphical visualization? Is it vocal or is it not, or you don't know?
I don't know, but I just could try to check it. Basically, if I look into the EU vocabularies,
Yeah, maybe if you send me the link, I can see a link to the viewer of taxonomies. I would see.
some older tools, accessible publishing, resources. I don't see it here really somewhere, but I think it has to be there because it's quite transparent too, and I think it's published with online tools, Bookbench, Showwalk, semantic knowledge base. Bookbench, they are using Bookbench here. So,
Yeah, but this is not the visualizer, and
yeah,
the one
it's not
is
the visualizer, yeah. And we have Showwalk.
okay.
Showwalk.
Oh, okay.
Showwalk is an online platform built to facilitate access to dissemination and visualization of controlled vocabularies. And I'm not really sure who's the provider of this.
By the way, you're not sharing the screen.
Yeah, no, sorry. I stopped sharing because I was sharing on I'm sharing on the presentation. Uh, yeah, application is realized as the open source, and documentation can be found on the program website, Showwalk. And the Showwalk, it looks like, yeah, it's a University of Rome in cooperation with the publication office of the European Union. So basically, this is something they have probably created for this use case.
Okay, thanks.
And the standalone distribution is Apache Keraf server, and the semantic Turkey services platform. Yeah.
Yeah, so Showbox, that's related to Workbench or Workbench because it's the same developers.
Probably yes. I think that they were just using the Workbench for the creation of the models and ontologies, and then the same team just have created some browser for the some visualization. Actually, I don't really think that the visualization is really nice. I think it's really confusing. I think it's quite confusing, and for someone who has no experience with ontologies and semantic web and RDF, you would be totally lost. I suggest.
I think it's important for them because it is somehow optimal, or there is some optimization for this Eurolex, or what is it, the legislative document. So probably this is why they are using it.
Yeah, and I also think that a lot of the stuff they are publishing there is for their own usage. So they just publish it, but the only organization which is actually using it is also them. So just publish there, and also the vocabulary, for example, the ELI, it's provided. This is the official publication, but it's not like someone from the outside would go there and just reuse it if he's not an ontology expert. Who wants to reuse it for some use case, and it's reused in the our likes page, and there it is just running in the background somehow. So the users, they don't really see it. They don't see there are some RDF data description, and so the stuff are just rendered from the graph. they don't see it and they don't have to see it. So in this case, I think it's quite okay. Do you have some questions on the vocabulary itself?
Nope. Nope.
Okay, doesn't look like. I think it could be interesting to try to interconnect some of the ontologies we were creating for the Ministry of Interior or just to interconnect them to the nation level, because it's something that I don't know that someone was doing that in wide range, and it would be really useful for us. For example, for the assembly lab or climate. Okay, so that's all. So I'm stopping the live stream.